This is Democracy Watch. Mark, in the immediate aftermath of the big blue wave election that took place on Tuesday, it looks like the Trump administration is figuring out ways to weaponize itself to prevent that from happening again. Can you explain what they just warned of coming out of the White House?
Yeah, so two things. Number one, from the White House podium, Caroline Leavitt said that there will be a new executive order that is going to come that is going to target voting. Now, in some sense, we knew this because Donald Trump has been saying that this is the case, but it is chilling to hear from literally the official podium of the White House that their reaction to Election Day is the issuance of a new executive order. And then, of course, the morning after the election, you have Donald Trump talking about the filibuster. And what does he say? They need the filibuster, in his view, so they can enact voter ID and other anti-voting measures, right? So this is a White House that understands that it lost big, that the American people are not with them. And so it's going to have to double down and triple down on voter suppression and election subversion if it's to have a chance in 2026.
Okay, so we've heard these threats come out of the White House, and of course, the basic response to that is that the elections take place at the state level, even at the more granular level than that, at the county level, whatever it may be. And so, how much power does the Trump administration have to actually put into place some of these, executive orders that they're threatening?
Well, so look, I think we need to take what Donald Trump is saying here and what the White House is saying and broaden the aperture a little bit, right? So number one, some of the things they want to accomplish, they can accomplish in red states because red states have become slavishly beholden to making any election change that Donald Trump and the White House want. So let's just assume that in states where you have a Republican governor and a Republican legislature, they can change their election laws to target voters who might vote Democratic, right? And they can make those changes at the state level. Number two, they control the Department of Justice. And this Department of Justice operates at Donald Trump's beck and call. And we have already seen signs that Pam Bondi and the people working for her will, again, target blue states, will target voting methods used by Democrats, will try to gather sensitive voter data information on literally every American across the country. And they'll send monitors, as we saw them do in California and New Jersey. They didn't do it at scale this time, but Lord knows what it will be next time. Plus, remember, Donald Trump controls the military, and we've seen the deployment of the National Guard. Now, all of those things are before you get to the executive orders, right? So the executive orders, I think we need to understand, are one piece of a multi-pronged strategy that Donald Trump will try to execute in order to interfere in the 2026 midterm elections. We all need to be prepared for that. We all need to understand that that's where we're going. The narrow question of the executive order is, look, my law firm and we sued Donald Trump over his last election executive order, and we won. And so, a lot of this stuff will wind up getting litigated in court, and I can promise everyone I'll be leading that fight along with my law firm. But some of these things are going to be more challenging to deal with in court. And we're really going to need governors. We're going to need local election officials. We're going to need Democrats in Congress, to step up and really stand up for democracy.
And by the way, just as a quick aside for folks who are watching right now, when Mark says that he will be leading that fight, that is in the literal sense of the word. He is in the court, filing these lawsuits, fighting the Trump administration every step of the way. I think you're litigating cases in 30 different states against Republicans right now. So a small step that we can all take to show some support, a little bit of support for Mark and his team, and to amplify their voices, is the Sign Up for Democracy docket, which is the news outlet he founded to focus on everything voting in elections. I'm going to put that link right here on the screen and also in the post description of this video. If you're not yet signed up, please go ahead and sign up. Mark, you had mentioned the fact that we have all of these Republican governors, Republican states that show slavish devotion to Donald Trump. Do you think the fact that there was such a repudiation of Trump and Trumpism at the polls on Tuesday kind of makes it less likely that all of these Republicans in the states are going to be so obsequious to Donald Trump? Or on the flip side, do you think the fact that there was that repudiation will make them double or triple down on these efforts to suppress the vote and get an undue leg up because they realize that that's their only path?
Yeah, I think we need to bifurcate here, right? There are going to be some Republicans who may try to distance themselves from Trump on some of his unpopular policies, like his tariff policy, is already looks like it is falling apart. And I know you've covered that on your main channel. I hope everybody is subscribed to this channel because you'll get a wealth of information, not just about democracy in court, but what's happening in the broader political system. So you're going to see some Republicans sort of separate on healthcare, on taxes, and on costs. But when it comes to the issues of how elections are run, when it comes to undermining free and fair elections, Donald Trump and the Republicans are frankly joined at the hip, right? He's trying to actually do their bidding. He's trying to target young voters who, by the way, last night, for all the rhetoric we had leading into last night, we again saw young voters turn out for Democrats. He's targeting minority voters, again, for all of the rhetoric we heard from the pundit class about how Democrats were losing minority voters. Tuesday night was a good night for Democrats with minority voters. And so, we're watching as these folks are going to be targeted because that's where Donald Trump can do his most good at a process level for these Republicans. So they're not going to distance on that.
Mark, after Tuesday's results, you and I had spoken a lot about the ways in which Trump could weaponize the DOJ, weaponize the federal government, and really begin the process of undermining the election results. It was such a massive repudiation that I think that even he recognized that the juice wasn't worth the squeeze here. I mean, to claim that the results were rigged in like California, and meanwhile we've got the Mikey Sherrill winning by 15 points in New Jersey, Abigail Spanberger winning by 15 points in Virginia, flipping 13 seats in the House of Delegates, flipping 2 seats in Mississippi, flipping seats in Georgia, winning these ballot measures in Maine, retaining the Supreme Court 5-2 Supreme Court majority for the Democrats in Pennsylvania. So it was across the board very consistent. So may have kind of rung even more false than we had anticipated if he tried to undermine the results in like California, for example. But does what we see in any way restore your faith in the ability for the states to be able to stand up for the electoral process? Or are you just as nervous as we head toward 26 and 28 with Trump at the helm?
Yeah, no, it doesn't change my view at all. I mean, look, you pointed out, like, you can't claim fraud when you lose by 17 points, right? Like, I mean, it's just like, it's beyond implausible.
Carrie Lake is out here saying, oh, contraire.
Right, exactly. Right. So I think that explains, why we have not seen in the early days following Tuesday claims of fraud. But we need to understand, we saw Donald Trump claim that there was going to be fraud or was already fraud in California prior to Election Day. We saw on Election Day reports around the country of Republicans claiming fraud and irregularity in a variety of the states and the races you listed. What happened is it just got away from them, right? Like at some point, their margins become so big and the tidal wave becomes so broad that there's nothing to do there. Also, don't forget that Donald Trump made a strategic decision that it was better for him to blame others rather than engage that fraud discussion, right? Because if he engages the fraud discussion, then he kind of puts himself on the side of having to say, well, I was on the ballot and I would have won but for fraud. And he just decided to wash his hands of it. He's not going to be able to do that in 2026, right? In 2026, he's not going to be able to do that. And also in 2026, just from a resource standpoint, the House Republican Committee, the Senate Republican Committee at the federal level, they will have the apparatus, they'll have the money to wage battles in a way that, like, let's be honest, a candidate who loses a state legislative race in Mississippi or in Virginia is not able to do. So none of this, I think, should let people's guard down. If anything, like I said, and we talked about this before the election, Donald Trump was going to use this as a test. He was going to test the fences. He was going to see where the vulnerabilities were. I think one of the most underreported stories right now, Brian, is we saw bomb threats being called in again. And you and I talked about this on your live stream, which was really great. And I hope you do it again for Election Day, because if so, I can promise you I'll be there a year from now if you do it again. But we talked about this because it's the kind of tactic that we've now seen. We saw it in 2024. We saw it in 2025. It did not obviously affect the outcome of the election in 2025. But, is that the kind of thing that, you start to, the bad actors start to toy with and say, well, what about it worked? What about it didn't work? What were the reactions? What weren't the reactions? What were the overreactions? So look, I'm not here to tell anyone not to celebrate the election we just had. Everybody should celebrate. It was an unequivocal win for Democrats and for democracy. But if you think that is the end of the story, that this is now baked in the cake for 2026, you're wrong. Republicans are going to regroup. They're going to weaponize everything they can against free and fair elections, and we all need to be prepared to fight back.